Hi, and welcome back to Guff Stuff Weekly Podcast. I'm Javen.
And I'm Guff.
Today we're going to be talking about um, the Collector's Corner, TCGs, trading card games, um, exploring rare and valuable collectibles. We might delve a little bit into miniatures, maybe.
Okay.
I'm adding it to
Collectibles, yeah.
our list
Yeah.
here.
Stuff. The collecting world of
Yeah,
the
the collection. And it doesn't. Well, we're going to focus on TCGs here, but a lot of what we're going to talk about applies to, in my experience, um, mini war game stuff,
Yeah.
different models, things like that, rare older prints, stuff like that, the old Ral Parthas, if you will. And Guff has some experience in an adjacent territory as well with coin collecting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, all kind of same concept for most of it.
yeah, so a lot of it applies to that,
Right.
right? Okay. So, why don't you kick us off, Guff? What are we talking about first?
I think to begin with, we're going to start talking about the history and the popularity of trading card games. I like to talk a little bit about how we've done podcasts talking about when Magic started and trading card games started, and it's fair to say that Magic was probably the first one that really got it going. Now there might have been a fringe game that started before.
Yeah, it's not the first,
But
it's not the inception of the idea.
No, but it's the one that made it go.
That hit the ground
right?
running.
And
that started the industry, if you will.
Yeah. And back then, I remember clearly the first time I was introduced to Magic, and I didn't go with it because there was another game called Spellfire at the time.
Yep.
I was in a Walden bookstore, which for you, if anybody out here knows, not a thing anymore. Hasn't been one for probably about 15, 20 years, but they were mall bookstores.
Yep.
And I went in and I was buying some Dragonlance books because I want to finish off my collection. And at the front counter, they had just booster displays of starter decks. They had maybe 5-10 Magic ones, 5-10 Spellfire ones. So I bought all of them. I bought everything that was there.
Okay.
Because they were cheap. They were like, I'd like to say they were $5.99 at the time, which, of course, back then was a lot of money. But I was a young.
But for a starter deck,
and I was making a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I think I'm just gonna buy them all, and I brought them all back to Warroad. And of course, this is in a different town, about 150 miles from where I live, because I was closest town to sell anything that was even remotely collectible, gaming related. And my family and my friends absolutely hated Magic because it was too complicated. Which, if you think about
back in the day, it was pretty dense.
It was meant to be,
and it was
a mathematician that made the game.
Well,
right?
So can I sidebar off that a little bit?
Yeah.
Give you a little bit, just a brief little bit more about the history of Magic.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Do you know why Magic was invented?
Well, I know that was Richard Garfield, and right, that was his name.
Richard Garfield.
Sure. And he was a mathematician, and he wanted an easier way to solve equations. Was it, or a physical way of solving equations without having like calculators? Or something?
I don't actually know that portion of it.
Okay.
What I know is the reason and the motivation why it was invented.
Okay.
As a collective game.
Mm-hmm.
And a group game.
Right.
And it was specifically invented to play in between rounds at like Gen Con.
Oh.
And D&D tournaments.
Right.
D&D tournaments used to be this thing where you'd have a tournament character and you'd go and you'd try to beat these modules. Essentially.
Yeah, and sometimes there's long periods between
and there's huge long waits.
Yeah.
And so Magic was invented as a game to play between those tournament sessions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it was initially designed, I believe, just for Gen Con, which is, if you know anything about tabletop RPG history, you'll know about Gen Con. If not, by all means, look it up.
Right.
But it was initially invented for Gen Con, and the initial print run of it ran out, like, immediately, day one. Like, they could not make enough cards for the hype that it had generated.
Right. No, of course, no. It got crazy. And it was crazy. And I remember clearly that when it took off, I was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
I was still playing Spellfire, and I still had every belief that TSR was going to beat Wizards of the Coast.
Right.
Because TSR was huge. They had second edition. They had, they were working on, I think they had even started working on 3 at that time, but second edition was so huge that who could take over TSR Hobbies?
Yeah.
Nobody. And
now look at the flip of that is Wizards owns.
which I believe the Wizards company at the time tried to sell Magic the Gathering to TSR.
I wouldn't doubt it.
And TSR said no.
Yeah, because we
And
have
so
Spellfire.
they made Spellfire instead, which to me at the time was a superior game because it was way easier to learn.
Okay.
And it had it was so familiar because all the art in TSR was literally art in the books that you had bought.
Yeah.
It was your Dragonlance artists, your Faerun artists, your D&D artists, any of those artists, Larry Elmore, all those guys had done art for all those cards. And just same pictures, and it just felt familiar. It felt like home.
Yeah.
So I literally threw away probably 10 starter decks. The brown ones, the ones that were they were literally together with perforation. You tore them apart and gave one to somebody and another one you opened them up and you played.
Huh.
And at the time, Spellfire got so big, when I went back to Walden's, I just bought all the Spellfire out again. And when I got home, I threw all my Magic away because who keeps cards? I thought to myself, I kept all those 80s and 90s baseball cards for nothing.
Yeah.
And basketball cards. I kept a few of the important guys, but
yeah.
I threw the rest away because nobody wanted them.
Yep.
I thought same thing was going to happen with these stupid trading card games. Little did I know.
Yeah, little did you know.
Years later, this is going to be the biggest game in history, and yeah. So.
All right. So that's a little bit about the history and popularity of it. There's some other games that I'll briefly touch on.
Right.
The Pokemon trading card game.
Yep.
Also made by Wizards of the Coast. Has world tournaments, played world over.
Right.
Very simplified version of a TCG. It's probably the easiest game to learn as far as trading card games go.
Well, at least the ones that are active.
Yeah, at least the big, huge names.
Yep.
There might be an obscure case of like maybe Force of Will is easier to learn, but I don't actually know a whole lot about that game.
I don't like anything that has to add lots of zeros to it.
Yeah, and that was the beauty of Magic, is it had very small numbers.
No, yeah, everything was easy. You could do it on fingers if you had to.
And no decimals or anything like that.
No.
And then the other big juggernaut of the industry is Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah.
Which was the Japanese? Yeah, Japanese.
I have no idea who did
Konami.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Konami, yep.
Konami basically produced Yu-Gi-Oh! And so yeah, I just want to make sure that we are aware of other games, but we're going to try to focus on Magic because it's probably the most...
Well, it's the most relatable, and it's probably got the biggest collecting presence, at least in our country.
Yeah.
Being in the Western culture.
And even in the Eastern culture, too, it's pretty big.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know anything.
I
know the video games are different in Eastern culture compared to here.
Yeah.
You know, people are getting excited about Skyrim here. They're probably getting excited about remake StarCraft over there. I don't know. It's really, or the next Soul Blade game or something. Yeah. I don't know.
Guild Wars.
Yeah, they get excited about different stuff.
Anyways, so what makes TCG items collectible? So the base concept of Magic the Gathering is it's a 15 card pack. So this is the original loot box, if you will.
Yep.
And you are given, let me think here. This is working off memory, so just give me a second.
Okay.
It's 15 cards. I believe it's 10 commons. It's 3 uncommons.
Yep.
And then 1 rare. And then later on in Magic's history,
it's just 1 random.
It was either a rare or a mythic rare.
Yep.
And the mythic rare had a lower probability chance of being in the pack.
Right.
Then you get 1 basic land, and that's the 15 cards.
Yep.
Now they slip in things like tokens,
limited edition cards, and cards limited edition sets.
And there's always been since, I believe, I don't think Tempest block. I can't remember the block after Tempest. Maybe essentially not too far after in the history of Magic.
Right.
There was always a percentage chance of a foil card or holographic card, however your trading card states what it is. It's basically a shiny card.
Right.
And it has a rarity multiplier, if you will.
Yep.
So like the chance of getting this is rare.
Yeah,
it's an extra card.
It would be.
It's an extra card, so it's 16 cards in the pack. So it's the odds of getting this is rare, and then the odds of that being a common are more likely than it being an uncommon, are more likely than it being a rare or mythic.
Yeah.
So there's this idea that there's this prize you can chase of the rarest foil card.
Right.
And some of them multiply the value by 10 times.
Yeah.
Some of them multiply value by 100 times. It's all dependent upon what the card is and what printing it is.
Yeah. The other thing is what artist too. I've noticed there's been cards in the past not even that long ago, that it was just a basic card that fetched for lands.
Yep.
But because there was an artist that did it compared to some other card that was very similar to it, the card with the art that everybody loved sold for a lot more. Like you go to the TCG players or wherever else, which we'll get into in a little bit, but how to get to buy and sell these, its value was higher literally because of the artist. I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, but you go back, even back in the older Magic days, you'd have the one card that would be printed 4 different, and it'd be 4 different art styles.
Yep.
And it wasn't the same artist. It would be 4 different artists. And you'd be like,
Specifically Homeland.
yeah.
Very well.
It was
known
like
for that.
some of those cards, and I think the only reason some of the Homeland cards are even worth anything is because some of the artists were more popular than some of the other artists.
Yeah, and some of the big names in Magic art, Christopher Rush,
right.
he did the original Lightning Bolt, the Black Lotus. Many, the list goes on.
Right.
Of very important cards to Magic's history, and the art was just really good.
Yeah.
Fun fact: the original Volcanic Island card, which is a rare card, a land.
Yep.
In the first 4 Magic sets.
Yeah, the dual land.
Dual lands.
Yeah,
it was the red-blue land.
Yep.
The original, or was it Tropical Island? Not Volcanic. It was Volcanic or Tropical. I can't remember.
Right.
I'm sorry. Tell me in the comments, if you will.
I'm sure somebody.
I could look it up, but we're going off the fly here a little bit. But there was a tropical bird on it.
Oh, yep.
And they loved the art so much, but they didn't want to use it. They didn't want any creatures on the lands.
Right.
And so they made a creature that has become one of the most staple cards in Magic history off of that card, the Birds of Paradise.
Oh, yep. Birds of Paradise.
A 0/1 that taps ready color mana. They liked the art so much, they literally made another card just for the art. So the art is just as important in the early days as what the card did.
Right. And I think they lost some of that for a while, at least in my personal collection, because I know when I started, nobody was collecting art in cons. Cons of Tarkir. I mean, there was very few people collecting just specifically for the art.
So what they were collecting in Cons of Tarkir specifically, and like from that M15 through Origins, actually through Kaladesh, I think,
going to Kaladesh,
was the misprints, because there was a weird misprint thing that was happening.
Yeah, there was some. Yeah, that definitely was a big thing. Still is if you could find a good misprint right now.
All right, so that's what makes them collectible, essentially, is that there is a value assigned to each card, a weighted value, essentially.
You also can't forget the emotional and the nostalgic aspect. In fact, just you talking about Birds of Paradise, no, I know for sure that you would pay more for that card just because of that. Maybe if there was a Volcanic Island, well, maybe you would on a player's level. But on a collector, would definitely pay more because they're like, oh,
as a player, I don't care.
No, because
but the collector in me does show out, and it shows even with the most recent deck that I've purchased.
Yeah. You go back and look for the older cards you like.
I went and looked back for the older cards. I found specific printings. I found artists, full arts, stuff like that. And I have 2 signed copies by my favorite artist of probably my favorite Magic art.
Okay.
Christopher Ron.
Right.
You can look him up. He's done tons of phenomenal cards through Magic's history. But Sigarda, host of Herons. One of the 3 angels from the original Innistrad set. I have 2 signed copies of her.
Nice.
And I haven't played that of her because I love the art and I love the artist.
Yeah.
There's his style. I could get into what his style is, but that's an art history podcast. I'm not going to do that. But yeah, no, there's definitely a nostalgic and emotional value.
Yeah.
I am more attached to I'm less likely to trade those cards up in value. Like, say someone wants that card, it's maybe a $25 card being a signed copy.
Right.
But if someone wants to trade me like a $50 card, I'm gonna be like, probably not. I could double the value of the card and buy more.
Right.
But honestly, I won't ever get rid of it.
Right. It's the card you like. Yeah, no doubt. So moving on to I know we've talked a little bit, we delved a little bit about the rare and valuable cards, but the concept of the rare, like we discussed that mythics and stuff are more valuable, but it's not always true.
Right. So a lot of it has to do with, and this is really interesting because Magic is a great example of it. The rarity of a card has a weight to its value,
right?
But it does not inherently make it
the most
expensive or the most valuable. Like you could pull a mythic rare Starstorm out of a $15 pack,
Right.
but the $3 uncommon or the $8 uncommon Path of Exile that comes in that pack is worth 8 times as much. And why is that? Why does that happen? And you can get it. Either one of us can get
it. It literally comes down, and I didn't know this until I started buying and selling cards and running a game store. It is literally the playability of that card in the format that you're playing.
Yep.
I come across that with Lightning Bolt was my first experience in that.
Yep.
And shares the plows the
swords to plowshares.
Swords to plowshares. I had a guy come in my store, and at the time it didn't matter to me, and it still doesn't. I have no hard feelings towards it at all because I was selling the cards for what they were. They weren't even my cards.
Yeah.
I was selling somebody else's cards for value, and that's what they said they wanted them for. They say they wanted X number the price on these cards. I said, fine, I'll sell them for that much. I get this much, you get this much. Fine. This guy come in. I just had met him a couple of times, and he bought all my lightning bolts and all my sword to plowshares and bought a few other cards. He says, I got to tell you something. I said, what's that? He says, these cards are worth a lot more than you're selling for. I said, so? I was running a thrift store. I didn't really care.
Yeah.
But he explained to me that's where I started like, oh, okay. And then you had come in and talked a little bit about it at different times. And then there was other people that were starting to, and it got to me like, why? Well, Lightning Bolt, 1 mana, 3 damage. Instant to anything.
One of the...
Like, what?
And it's great because I do want to talk about a little bit about the misconception of Lightning Bolt, just a bit.
Yep.
Because this will explain some things too, why some people don't see it as valuable and some people see it as more valuable. So Lightning Bolt says 1 red mana, instant speed, deal 3 damage to a creature or player.
Yep.
I believe it was to any target was the original word.
Right, yeah, any target.
And I believe that's the errata wording now.
Right.
So what's so great about that? You can Healing Salve,
right?
The white equivalent of it is 1 white mana, heal 3 damage.
Yeah.
Why is Lightning Bolt worth 100 times?
Right.
As much
at the time.
Salve?
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Yep.
Why is that? Well, it's the utility of Lightning Bolt.
Right.
So a lot of people look at it and go, oh, okay, I can deal 3 damage to my opponent. That's not the primary designated use of Lightning Bolt. It might be its intended use when they printed it, but its best use, like statistically, its best use is removing creatures of power 3 or less from the board.
Right.
Because you can play a creature, Vampire Nighthawk, complete pain in the ass, 3/1 flying death touch, lifelink. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, Lightning Bolt.
You Lightning Bolt it. You paid 1 mana for 3 mana.
Yeah.
And you immediately gain advantage because of that.
Yeah, it's also good for dealing. I know I play a lot of mono green. There's a lot of mono green cards that are 2 mana for a 4, 2/3/3 or 4/4, and I run that out there. Well, you put a 1/1 goblin in your Lightning Bolt and it's over.
Yeah, and
I spent tons of mana to get that.
All of a sudden, I'm ahead on the board,
and you're ahead on the board. And you have goblins still galore.
And it's that utility of it can aim at somebody's face to give you extra reach to kill them quicker, or it could be used to give you board advantage to ultimately win the game.
Right.
And so cards that can do that
can be worth more.
Are worth a lot more. Yep. Now, let's just use this cycle of cards for example. The other one that's not worth as much, which doesn't make a lot of sense if you think about it, is Giant Growth.
Right.
It gives a creature +3/+3. This means that its power and toughness become 3 greater. It becomes stronger. It can take out bigger creatures, deal more damage, and withstand more damage.
Yeah.
Now, why isn't that worth as much as Lightning Bolt?
Right.
Part of this also has to do with how many times they've been printed and what rarity.
Right.
But Giant Growth specifically wasn't as good. It's probably the 4th strongest of the 5 colors of that cycle. When I say cycle, I mean a card is printed for each color that had to do with 3 for 1 mana.
Right.
I'll get on the other 2. I know you guys are probably chomping at the bit for it. But Giant Growth is a situational card. It doesn't have the utility because it relies on a creature.
Yeah.
It relies on you having something on the board to pump up, essentially.
Right, yeah. You can't just cast it whenever you feel like it if you don't have a creature.
Now we get into some of the more valuable ones. So now we talked about Healing Salve. That's the bottom one. Then there's Giant Growth, which is the 4th one. Right. The 3rd one and the 2nd one are interchangeable, but arguably the black card, Dark Ritual, is the 3rd, and Lightning Bolt's the 2nd. So Dark Ritual says pay 1 black mana, get 3 black mana.
Right.
at instant speed.
Which kind of can be handy. It's
Which is
situational.
in the old days, it used to be Dark Ritual into Jazam Jin, which was a 5/5 flyer that
Right.
dealt damage to you every turn.
Right.
So you pump it out 2 turns early. You can't lightning bolt it now. You have to have a big mana spell that can effectively kill it. So it just gets you ahead on board. It can also be used in ramping up for a combo. You know, it counts for your storm counter and all these other mechanics. And so the utility of Dark Ritual is worth more than that of Giant Growth because its only burden is that you need 1 mana to produce it, but the options that it gives you are massive.
Right.
And then we get to the most expensive ones. So lightning bolts typically, I would say they value around like $2 to $4.
Yeah.
Roughly. The
Yeah, it was always the average of 3 was a really good guess.
Dark Rituals are about $1 a piece.
Yep.
Titanic Growth or Giant Growth's about 10 cents.
Yeah.
Healing Salve probably a penny.
Yeah, you couldn't give them away.
You're gonna notice a big discrepancy in the next one.
Right.
And that is Ancestral Recall.
Yeah.
Which is probably about $3,000 for the cheapest copy.
Oh.
And it's the same rarity as all the other 5.
Yeah, well, they only printed it one time.
But they only printed it in 4 sets.
4 sets, yeah, the early sets, right?
Yeah, the early sets. And then they realized how broken and strong it was, and it became illegal in almost every format.
Right.
Because it was so powerful. And what Ancestral Recall does is it says you pay 1 blue mana, and you get 3 cards. You draw 3 cards.
That's just dumb.
Which is insane
just
because
card advantage is pretty much.
If you have 2 more cards than your opponent, you have 2 more base options than your opponent.
Yeah.
And therefore, the possibilities that you can do are infinitely stronger than what your opponent can do with their hand.
Yeah.
And so this card just became extremely valuable.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a great way of that's a great looking at of how the rarity has not always has something to do with the value. You know, you could take other cards like Shadowborn Apostle, which at the time, and even in some formats, still is worth more than the other commons it's with.
Yep.
Because you can have 20 of them in your deck if you want.
Because and I guess, I don't know if our cheat sheet mentions this.
No, probably not.
But it is a concept that does warrant discussion because this is probably one of the single biggest contributing factors to price, and that is the metagame.
Yeah.
So the metagame is this idea of there is a archetype or a deck type or a construction of a specific cards that is common throughout a format. So like let's take Standard for example, which is the most recent sets, whatever. If a card is really powerful within that set, and it's played in almost every deck,
they just ban it.
The value's going to go up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's desired in every deck.
Like Shield Red,
if you need 4 copies of this card in every deck you play, or every deck that everybody's playing, everybody wants 4 of them. Well, that's way different than every green player wanting 4 copies of a card.
Right.
If every green, blue, black, white, purple, colorless
one splash will color just
wants to play a color just because of that card, it's going to inherently increase its value.
Yeah.
So that's an important thing. It's the metagame and what decks are meta, essentially.
Yep. Yeah. If there's like one card out there that, and I think a good example right now, if you're playing Standard, is Shieldred, I think is her name.
Shieldred the Apocalypse.
Yeah. And she literally is an answer for another card. And so everybody splashes her, whether it's sideboard or main deck, because if you don't, I think it's mono red, just trounces everything right now.
Well,
you splash her and
and not only that, she's just a very efficient creature.
Yeah.
She's a 4-mana 4/5 with Death Touch.
Right.
But she also has this cool ability of every time your opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life.
Yeah.
So every turn they're losing 2 life. It puts them on an immediate clock.
Yeah.
And so the utility of her is just
you have to
strong.
You have to build an answer for her in your deck.
Yeah, you need something, and she's resilient. That's the really
she's 4/5.
Yeah,
it's bad, but
so let's talk about limited edition and promo items.
Yep.
Magic's gonna kind of ramp it with this.
Maybe a little too much.
Yeah, there's almost a FOMO, a fear of missing out.
Oh yeah,
and they're using that to print these special art, special releases.
Yeah,
They've done it. I will say they've done a good job of making sure that they print normal versions of these cards as well.
right,
So it's only the collectors that are interested,
right, or they just
or the
reskin.
investors.
They reskin the card, like in Lord of the Rings set. A lot of the Lord of the Rings cards are very similar, if not identical, to another named card from a set older.
Yep.
But they just call it, Aragorn's sword instead
Yeah.
of the sword of annihilation or whatever. I don't even know what they call all the different things, but it was really interesting. But then of course then they made a My Little Pony set, which is like what?
Yeah.
What does that have to do with Magic the Gathering
Yeah.
at all?
Or I mean, they've done it with tons of.
Tons. Oh yeah, no, that's just there's so many out there.
There's definitely a buyer fatigue.
Yeah.
Happening.
Yeah, when you have a new set, a new item coming out every week. It's
Like back when
ridiculous.
I was big into Magic, it was just the core sets.
Yeah, like every 3 months, and maybe Commander decks once a year.
Yeah,
and coming out.
If you're playing a format that lets you use the Commander cards, yeah, you'd want to buy them, and then the value goes up. Blah
right.
blah blah. But you didn't have to worry about special arts or anything like that.
No,
it's a nice addition, but I feel like it's being leaned on very heavily.
Oh yeah.
But it's huge for the aftermarket and huge for the collectors.
Well, it's huge for Wizards too, if you think about it. They'll make a collector set and they make a regular set, and the collector set boosters go for $450. The regular booster goes for $150.
Yeah, so it's
the same exact
4.5
the same exact printing.
Yep.
With just different art.
Different art. Yeah.
The same card. Don't matter if I'm playing with a $300 card. It does the same thing as the 10-cent card.
But they're playing on the collector's /nostalgic value.
Yeah, it's. I get it from their standpoint, and if they can make money, I know as a player, I don't look for that. And if I get one, so be it. Lots of times I'll just sell it off and buy the 10-cent version because I don't want the $100 version. I guess we got to go over one more thing here before we move on to we've talked about collecting. We got to still talk about how to buy them, best place to buy and sell, and then how to protect your investment. But I want to go back. We didn't talk about iconic cards. We did a little bit because Ancestral Recall is definitely one of those iconic cards. But there is something even bigger. And now I'm not talking just the Black Lotus. I'm talking about the Power 9, the reserve list.
Yeah.
And the Power 9 is on the reserve list, if I recall correctly.
Do you want to cover this? Or
no, you go ahead.
Okay, so the Power 9, I'll loosely place them in order.
Right.
So the Power 9 are 9 of the most powerful cards in Magic.
Yep.
From its early days.
Yep. Cards that they said they would never reprint again because they're just not
too powerful.
There's
no way to balance it.
Yeah.
So the most powerful card in Magic is arguably Black Lotus.
Right.
It is a 0 mana artifact, so you pay nothing, put it on the battlefield, and you can sacrifice it to produce 3 mana of any color.
Right.
For reasons that we talked about in Dark Ritual, this is extremely powerful.
Right.
Because you can go from nothing to playing something 3 turns quicker than you should have been able to.
Right. Yeah, you could take it. Yeah, it's not that it works. You drop that, then if you have other cards in your hand that you could just add more mana.
Yeah.
And pretty soon you have 10 mana to do whatever you want with the rest of the cards in your hand. Then if you put a draw mechanic,
it also counts as a spell. It counts as an artifact.
Right. It's like the list just goes on.
The second most powerful card in Magic. Mm-hmm. This is sometimes argued between the second and third place.
Yep.
But it's Ancestral Recall.
Right.
And that is just pay 1 blue, get 3 cards.
Right.
We talked about that.
Yeah.
The third most powerful, and this is arguably swapped with Ancestral Recall sometimes on some lists.
Right.
And that is Time Walk. Now, Time Walk was 1 blue, 1 colorless mana. So for 2 mana, it said, take an extra turn.
Oof.
They tried to balance this by making it 5 mana later on, and even that was too powerful.
Right.
Then they tried to balance it by saying it's 6 mana, and you can't ever play it again in the same game. That was too powerful. They've had versions of it where it costs up to 11 mana. And even those were extraordinarily powerful.
Taking an extra turn is broken.
It's insane.
Like, that's just a broken mechanic.
And for reasons that you can go and explore yourself, this is an extraordinarily powerful card. Number 4 is Time Twister.
Yeah.
Time Twister says, pay 3 mana, 1 blue, 2 colorless. You and your opponent shuffle your hands and graveyards in the library and each draw 7 cards.
Right.
Now, this one's kind of tricky without explanation because your opponent gets 7 cards. What the hell? That's really good.
Right.
But let's work under the assumption that I have Black Lotus, Ancestral Recall, and all these other crazy cards.
Right.
I make all this free mana, and I dump out my entire hand on my first turn,
Right.
and I have 3 mana left over.
Yeah, you have sitting mana.
You have 7 cards in hand already.
Right.
From a hand that you wanted to keep, you chose to keep, you didn't mulligan, whatever. Yep. And I say, no, get rid of your hand, get a new one, and I am going to go from 0 cards to 7.
And then I have mana to start off with already.
And then I have all the stuff that I've built towards, and now you get to take your first turn. So I've gone through effectively 14 cards, and you've gone through none.
Yeah,
you haven't even played your first hand.
That's brutal.
Crazy card. They actually found a way to balance this card, which I thought was crazy. I never thought would happen.
Okay.
So they printed a card called Days Undoing.
Okay, yeah.
And this is in Magic Origins.
Yep, that one, yeah.
And it's the same effect as Time Twister, but it ends your turn immediately when the spell ends.
Right, yep.
Now, the fun thing to do is to... Okay, I'm not going to get into that. Whatever. Long story short, there's ways to play around that.
Right.
But it is balanced for the most part.
Right.
And then the last 5 are all lumped together.
Yeah.
Because they're all effectively the same effect.
Right.
And it's the Mox Opal, the Mox Jet, the Mox Ruby, the Mox Emerald, and the Mox Sapphire.
Right.
And these are artifacts, so they stay on the board, even after you use them and stuff. And they're 0 mana, and they produce 1 of each of their respective color.
Yep.
For reasons we talked about with fast mana, free mana, this is pretty strong.
Yeah, you start off with Mox Opal or Mox
Sapphire. Every Mox you play...
And then you have a Black Lotus in your hand. You have 5 mana just sitting there.
Every Mox you play effectively increases the amount of turns that you've played by 1.
Yeah.
Because you can only play 1 land per turn.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And that's the power 9.
Yeah.
There is a power 10.
Oh.
A 10th power, if you will, to make it a nice even number.
Right.
And that is the Library of Alexandria.
I think I've seen that one.
And this one is also reserved and limited to 1 in the most open format.
Right.
And what Library of Alexandria says is it's a land, so you play it, it taps for 1 colorless mana.
Okay.
So it can't produce colored mana. But it has a second effect of if you tap it and you have 7 cards in hand, you draw a card.
Okay.
So it's a free card every turn.
Right.
It's extra draw every turn for no investment at all.
Right.
Just takes your land drop. That's it.
Jesus.
So every turn, every time you play the game,
right,
or every turn you take, if you just get an extra card, crazy.
Right.
Super expensive card.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. That's why these are called reserve list cards. Is they're powerful, broken. They're very limited in almost all formats completely to 1 or maybe even none in some formats. Well, most formats none, but you go back to Legacy, 1 in a lot of cases.
Vintage.
Right? Yeah, vintage. Sorry, not Legacy.
The reserve list actually has a secondary purpose as well, because cards that aren't the power 9, cards that are just like a 1 mana 1/1.
Yep.
There are cards like that on the reserve list.
Okay.
And so the reserve list was initially printed to preserve the value of these extraordinarily old cards from Magic's history, and to preserve their value going forward.
Right.
They wanted people to know that, yes, these cards are expensive, and at the time they were.
Right.
But they wanted people to know, players and collectors to know, that if you invest in these, they will always have a value because we will never print more of them.
Right. Yeah, I think to kind of end this, not to end the podcast, but to end this particular segment, I think the most expensive cards sold, not including the limited edition cards that have come out.
Oh, you're talking about the
Black Lotus.
Yeah.
That was bought by Post Malone for $800,000.
And that's not the most he's paid for a single card.
No, he paid $2 million for the stupid
One Ring.
But that was just a one-off card. It was going to be made one time. Where there's many Black Lotuses out there.
Yeah.
But they vary in price. But this one was happy to be signed by the artist. So, and it was I think it was a 9.5. It wasn't even a 10, which is
you'd be hard pressed to find a 10.
Right. At least one that someone was willing to give up to have an artist sign it. But anyway, yeah. So I guess we forgot about the iconic rares. We went over some of those. I think the reserve list is a good way. If you need to know more about that, look up the reserve list. You'll see some of those are very iconic cards, and we've talked about quite a few of them. So how do you go about buying, selling, collecting? There's multiple ways to do that. Right?
Why don't you go first? How do you go about it?
Well, I'm a store, so I buy boosters. I open up and I keep cards and sell them to you guys.
Yep.
That's literally what I do. Or I'll go and if I like you guys come in saying you're looking for cards, I'll go online. There's multiple resources you can use. You can use. Some people swear by Amazon. One of our players do, and
Yep.
it drives me nuts because it's not the best place to buy anything on the planet. It's just what he uses,
Yeah.
and it kind of drives me nuts. But TCG Player, eBay, Star City,
Card
Abu
Kingdom is a new
Games,
one.
Channel Fireball. What's that?
Card Kingdom's another
Card
big
Kingdom.
one.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of big websites out there, and you know, you want the best deal, you got to shop for it. You literally
Yep.
do. I just generically go with TCG.
Because it's a marketplace.
And there's a marketplace. Everybody can sell on there.
Yeah.
So you and I both can sell on marketplace.
And they do have verified sellers, and
Yep.
like they
Yep.
do have a pretty good system for maintaining integrity.
Yep. And I guess that's the best, just to go out buying, selling. You know, that's the best way. That's how I do it. That's how a store collector does it. And the other way is when you're opening up, say at a draft. Sometimes after the draft's over, you trade cards with people.
Yep, trading cards is a good
You
way
know,
to do
it's
it.
a good way to do it. And when I trade cards, I try to, especially when it's a new set, I try not to look up the value of the cards because I don't want that necessarily influencing, and which is silly. But as a player, value of the card is not nearly as important as value to me as when I'm playing.
As what you need.
Right. I've literally opened up packs with, say, a monetary value of $10, but they had the fourth card of a play set that I knew was going to make my deck.
Yeah.
And maybe it's only $1 card, but I've opened 50 packs and I've gotten only 3. I need 4. So now a lot of people won't do that. I will.
Yeah.
At least initially, but you know, it's stupid as a store owner to do that. But as a player, that's how I work.
Yep.
I try to trade rarity levels.
And I think that's fairly common, especially
Right.
among like
French players are
people who
friends
play-
with each other.
yeah, more friendly players and
Yeah.
then more casual players.
Yeah, more casual players. Yeah.
So I'll give you the perspective.
Yep.
Someone who was effectively a tournament player.
Right.
Who went through massive amounts of cards, especially rares and high desired cards.
Right.
I work almost exclusively off card value.
Right.
So the marketplace value of a card. And I can't remember the last time I cracked a booster pack looking for a card.
Right.
I'll buy booster packs as like draft or sealed or as a fun thing to do. But I don't ever buy booster boxes or booster packs anymore. I'm the guy Wizards hates, you know, and most store owners wouldn't really care for unless they're selling singles.
Right.
But because I've gone through so many and had so much money invested in it, I had to be smart about it. I couldn't just buy packs because I would have been way more invested than I ever cared to be.
Right. Well, you end up getting, you know, I don't remember, like when people quit. I bought collections off people before, but they'll bring in 55 pounds worth of cards. Well, 55 pounds is going to be right up into the 150,000 cards.
Yeah.
And they sell them to me. Well, I'm not going to pay. I'm going to pay $3 per 1,000.
Yeah.
So you do the math.
Yeah. For bulk commons,
You go and buy that much in your booster packs, you're going to pay tens of thousands of dollars.
Exactly.
For that, you know, and that's what happens to people who get it. That's the collectors, though. The guys who are initially trying to collect every card themselves, instead of just buying them already.
And so, as a competitive player, my goal was I needed 4 Tarmogoyfs, and if I was going to crack packs for Tarmogoyfs, I probably could have easily invested $2,000.
Yeah, because one, the packs were expensive,
or I could bite the bullet and pay $150 per.
Yeah,
and people would be like, "Why would you pay $150 for a card?"
Because I didn't have all these extra cards.
Because I didn't have the excess money to pay for all the packs.
Right. Yeah. And with the hope that you were going to get them, you might not even get them.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I watched. I don't know how many people opened the beta or revised on YouTube or Twitch, looking for that Mox or that Black Lotus,
Power 9, whatever.
and they pull out the most expensive cards, $5.
Yeah.
But then that's the average price of those cards in those packs.
And the packs themselves,
they're paying like
hundreds of dollars.
$8,000 for those packs. Oh yeah,
Jesus.
some of those old ones are paying $8 to $10, $12,000 for them. You know, they're at these conventions and they're like, open up. Their most expensive cards, $12.
Yeah.
It's like, but they had a chance to pull a $50,000.
Exactly.
They're white gloving and
that's taking it to the extreme, right?
Right.
And so, but basically, like, if you want to be a competitive player and you want to be a tournament player, and you want to play many different types of decks and have access to many different card pools, the secondary market and the trading market is where you want to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Like, and yeah, but if you're a casual player, I think cracking packs is the way to go.
Yeah, well, it's a good way to play. It's a good way. Well, it really comes down to if you're a casual player, which most people are. The
Mhm.
bulk people are casual because not everybody's going to tournaments. Not everybody's trying to do this. The best part about it is you're sitting around a table, you're opening packs, and I know you've done it. I've done it. We've all done it. You're opening packs, and somebody gets this card, you get this card. And it's just the camaraderie, and the shared fun of doing it together. It's like when you're playing board games, you're doing them together. You're playing video games, doing it together with somebody. It's more fun overall than it is when you're just being a loner.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
buying a booster box and open them by yourself. Even as a store owner, when I've opened thousands of boosters by myself, there's very little excitement to it. It's literally separate, sort, pack. Now, moving on to that though, because we're going to move on a little bit. I'll let you have something desperate to share. Is how do you protect your investment?
My number one recommendation.
You open these packs, you get your 4 Tarmogoyfs. What do you do with them?
So if I had a deck that was extremely expensive or had very expensive cards in it,
You might be the wrong person to ask. Actually, we might have to get somebody else in here.
why is that?
Honestly, this is just a personal thing. I've seen you mistreat your cards, not like damaging them on purpose, but I see you shuffle. I see the way you set them on the table. I can guarantee almost every deck of cards you have has a nice little curve from where your thumb puts it on the table.
No,
They used to. I don't know if they do
no,
anymore.
not me.
Or who is it? Maybe
It was Gamer
Logan?
Nope.
No.
He was pretty protective. It was the specific instance you're referring to.
Oh, it just
had to do with a set of Goblin guides
right.
that were an expensive card. They were foiled, and they had this curve to them.
Right.
Because the foils process.
Well, the foils always curve.
But and then so there's a couple gamers that ripple shuffled like Force of Wills that I know.
You ripple shuffle.
No,
you used to.
Not the way that.
Maybe with your $20 Goblin deck, huh?
Yeah. So. No,
anyway, how do you protect your?
I am pretty protective of my cards.
Yeah, well, I know the valuable ones you have been.
First and foremost, make sure you know, like, if you're at a gaming center or a convention or a game store, keep an eye on your cards.
Yeah.
And this is just good practice for your wallet. Keep an eye on your cards like you keep an eye on your wallet.
Yeah.
Because you just never know.
Yeah, well, your cards sometimes are more than your wallet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, let's be honest.
And then
most of these gamers walk in with a deck that's $500 and their wallet's got 20 in it.
I always like the buddy system as well.
Yep.
Make sure that you have someone that you can trust to look over it if you have to run to the bathroom or whatever. But the most important thing I recommend to all players is sleeve your cards.
Put them in semi-rigids or
no. Just, I mean, if it's a super expensive,
I know, I'm just being funny. Yeah, sleeve your cards.
And this is from a guy who plays with expensive cards.
Yep.
So, and if you're really worried about it, double sleeve your cards.
There's actually a guy that was in here playing one time, and he's a very good friend of yours.
Yep, I remember this scenario.
Another guy at the table spilled a coffee on his cards, and he was playing with the most expensive deck he said he owned.
Yep.
And he was mad. He was literally mad. And he thought about it. He's like, no, I'm fine.
Double sleeved.
He says, why is that? He says, I double sleeved. And then when you double sleeve, you put them backwards from each other. Yep. So not both ends are facing open on the top.
And I convinced him to do that.
Which is good because it saved him a whole lot of money when the other guy spilled a whole cup of coffee on his deck.
And so, like, if you're truly worried about your cards, double sleeve them.
Yeah.
It is worth the investment.
Makes it a little more bulky to shuffle and deal with, but whatever.
It's not too bad, though.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is what it is. And
most deck boxes actually do plan for double sleeving.
Now they do, yeah. Yep. They never used to. Some of the older ones, like I used to buy, man, you start getting more than one sleeve of those and be like, nope.
And that goes to the next segue, deck boxes.
Yep.
It not only does it help you organize, it also protects your cards.
Yep.
And there's tons of them out there. Through all my experience and all of Magic, I've beta tested a lot of them.
Yep.
Gotten with you, I've done that.
Yep.
With the other game store, I've done that. The cheapest option is the rigid plastic flip tops.
Yep.
With the Velcro.
Yep.
That's your cheapest option that will give you the best benefit for the price.
Right. Yeah. If you drop it, your cards aren't going to be annihilated.
Now I'm gonna shout out to my favorite deck box. Now this might be a product plug, whatever. I don't care.
That's okay.
Boulder deck boxes.
Yep.
They snap together. They're hard, rigid plastic. You could drive a car over them probably.
Yeah, you could stand on them, and it's not.
And they fit 100 cards, double sleeve.
I have one over there.
And they snap together nice. They feel nice. They're compact. They're not very big. The perfect deck box, in my opinion.
Yeah,
that I've come across.
They are good. Yeah.
You can also get ones that hold dice and all these other crazy.
Yeah, you
things.
get ones hold dice, tokens, pencils. They're soft. They're velvet covered. But why do you need a velvet interior if you?
And the other thing I like about the boulders is they don't rely on magnets. They don't rely on.
No, it's literally pressure fit.
It's pressure fit, snap together plastic.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Hard polyurethane or whatever.
Yeah. They're tough. They're a tough box. I have mine and I still use.
And I believe they're waterproof or water resistant.
I would have guessed so.
I should test that sometime. I should dip one in water and see if any water.
Right, just test it out. Maybe we should do product reviews like that.
Maybe we will. But yeah, that's
actually really
so. Yeah, sleeves and deck boxes.
Right.
Ultimately, if you're going to single sleeve and buy one of the Boulder deck boxes, you're looking at about $20.
Yeah.
But if you're playing with a $20 card, it's worth it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
If you're playing with a single $20 card, it's worth it.
Yep, yeah, because it protects that one card. Well, you probably have 4 versions of that card, so it's probably an $80 deck. Yeah, the other way is a lot of people like to bulk up their cards. They put them in either cases, which are made specifically. There's cardboard boxes, which are for the generic uncommon. Unfortunately, they're susceptible to water damage. The way I've done it in the past is I use Rubbermaid bins.
Yep.
And I'll put my cardboard box in those to snap them shut. Or if I got my rares and mythics, a lot of guys, and almost every guy that I know has a binder.
Yeah.
Like they have the rare and mythic binder because when they go to a tournament or they go to a casual night, they bring that binder so they can trade and sell and whatever else with other people.
I kept a binder for many years.
Well, I mean, it's not for the guy who is laser focused anymore.
No,
it's not. But it's for the guy who says, "I'm gonna play Magic once in a while, and I'm gonna keep a regular, and I'm gonna try and keep up a little bit, but I'm not playing maybe standard, or even if I'm playing standard, they bring their binders so they can trade." That's just.
So that covers protecting.
It covers a lot of the protecting, and collecting, and displaying, and all that good stuff. Obviously, store owners. We have display cases. We have lots of ways to go about it. I usually store all mine in binders, just so people want to look at my binders. I have standard, non-standard. Maybe I have my legendaries because people want to look for commander specific cards.
And the thing about the binder that I should state is it's not necessary.
No,
because you can use basically any box to store your card, and it will do just as good a job as a binder.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because cards brushing against cards won't ruin cards.
No.
Or they shouldn't.
No.
Unless there's debris between them.
But with the binder, it's easier for
people to access.
It's like if I'm a store owner and I have, say, all my rares in a card box, that person's going to touch every single card I own.
Yep, that's true.
And if it's 15 customers a day, it's a lot of greasy fingerprints. I mean, who knows the guy who's eating Cheetos or has a little pork fat down there or something. And trust me, it happens. I've seen it time. Or a guy spills on your counter into a cardboard box and ruined your Amaket, which has happened in my store. 99% of my Amaket cards were gone because someone spilled a soda on them. I remember binders protect all those rare cards that are worth more than nothing.
And I remember an instance of I had just got done working on a vehicle and my hands were all oily and nasty. I washed them as best as I could.
Yeah,
but
right.
There's that grease that always stays.
Yeah, there's always that little bit of.
And I went into the card shop and I wanted to buy some cards. And they worked with me, and I'm like, I wanted to check the condition of the cards, and so rather than just grab them, this kind of lies on you if you're looking at someone else's cards, be it a shop or another player's.
Right.
Is if you're worried about damaging their card, have them put it in something so you can look at it.
Put it in the sleeve. Yeah.
Put it in the sleeve, and that's what I had them do. I had them put it in a card loader, a top loader.
Yep.
And then I inspected the card from there. Yeah. And then I was happy and I bought the card.
Yeah. No, I used to, as a store owner, I used to put all my cards in sleeves. But then I realized that people who are buying your cards don't care. They really don't. They don't care if your card's in a cardboard box or it's loose or in a cardboard box sleeve. They don't care. They just want to look for your cards.
Yep.
So I got rid of all the stupid sleeves, and now it doesn't matter. People still buy my cards. So
But
yeah. So anyway, I guess we should probably conclude this at some point.
yeah,
As much as that
uh,
hurts my feelings.
I guess conclusion. Let's just collecting is fun.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's an absolute fun thing, and it's adjacent to a lot of other
Yeah.
things like being competitive, blah 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 blah.
Yep.
Collecting isn't necessary to be any of those things,
No.
but it can be something all of its own.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we have a guy that comes in here that I would say is he plays Magic because everybody else does. I don't even think he particularly likes it, but we call him the librarian.
Yeah.
Because he literally collects the cards, so he can have 4 of each, and he just collects them because he likes collecting cards. He likes to, and then he went through and he sells his collection off. He still kept a few of his decks because they were his favorite style cards, but he literally does it for the social interaction and the aspect of collecting and talking about it with people.
Yep. It's a hobby.
So it is fun.
It's a hobby
It's
in
a
and of
hobby.
itself.
Yeah.
Collecting
Yeah,
things
it definitely
is a
could
hobby
be
in
just
and
a
of itself.
hobby. It could be a game. It could be whatever you make of it. Magic is literally a special game. It's a game that if you make what you want of it, you can make it. You can make. There's people that literally that's all they do: buy and sell Magic and make tons of money.
Yep.
I've watched YouTube videos where guys have put themselves through college. That's literally how they did it. They went to the local game store, buy up a bunch of boosters, go home, crack packs, sell them online, go back to the game stores, trade in the, $200 mythic foil they got for a new booster box. Go home, open up, go sell those online, come back, take some of the money, and they put their way through college.
Yep.
Like it's literally what you want. Is a game. It's the most complex game in history. Not you can't even argue it. You can say that chess is no. Magic by far is.
Yeah.
Well, there's videos. I mean that literally debunk.
And the last thing
It's not.
I want to add, I want to get in there before we close, is that we talked a lot about Magic, but we did talk about some other games. A lot of this applies to any sort of collectible.
Yep. Yeah, it goes to any collectible.
And we just use Magic because it's a very ubiquitous.
There's not many people that go into a game store that don't know what Magic the Gathering is.
Yep.
Even people that don't know, like there's a guy come in talking about board games, or a lady, and she knew what Magic the Gathering was. She never bought any cards, never played the game, never even seen them. She just knew what it was, though.
Yep. Yeah, it's just so pervasive.
Because you just know, like you go into a game store, you go into Walmart, you know what Magic the Gathering is,
So that being said, I think that's it for this episode. Long one, but we hope you enjoyed it. It's a lot of information.
Yeah, I think on some of these we'll probably get a little longer because there's more to talk about. And we always said we wanted to go deeper into some of these subjects. And I think this is a pretty good subject to start with to go deeper because you and I both know a little bit about this. I know it a little different on a different aspect.
Yep.
I'm not the hardcore player that you were or are. I don't look into it that deep. I literally play mono green. That's my enjoyment out of it, which makes most people want to just vomit the minute I say it because it's like, that's just stupid. You play like $5 decks. Yeah, because you know what? I'm a store owner. I don't want to spend my money on these cards. I'd rather sell them to you guys.
This is my living, yeah.
This is my living. I'll play a $10 deck and be semi-competitive and have fun while I'm watching you guys buy my expensive cards and beat the crap out of me.
So, that being said, stay tuned. We might do more episodes like this. We'll see how everything turns out, what the viewership's like, all that, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And feel free to leave comments.
Not all of our videos are going to be, or video.
If you're listening on YouTube, feel free to leave comments and like it and let us know if you'd like this.
Yeah, look for Guff stuff on any social media. You can type it into Google and a lot of stuff will pop up.
Yeah. And feel free to leave us feedback and let us know if you want more like this.
Yep. But anyway, until next time, my name is Guff.
I'm Javen.